wanting to know a little bit of an introduction to qualitative research designs, which have been given to me to talk about for a few hours now, say 1.5 hours from now on. Okay, I have a PPT to present, but before that, I would just like to tell you. Uh, I hope I'm audible to all of you. Am I clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Clear enough? Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so see, we are into a time where social research is gathering momentum, isn't it? Because new problems, new issues, aspects, domains, environment, conditions, contexts have evolved and are changing every now and then. We have new forms of illnesses coming up. We have new ways of coping coming up, more political aspects coming into social and economic arena. So we have more complicated forms of inquiry that are coming up. So research methodology is also adapting, and we have mixed methodology coming up, mixed methods research design. So if you are interested in pursuing qualitative research seriously, apart from just gathering knowledge, you should feel it from your from your heart. I mean, as we say that for quantitative research, you should reach out to the voices of the people, and for qualitative research you should reach out to the mind and the heart of the people. So that needs passion, that needs motivation. So unless and until we are really very believed in ourselves that okay, this my research needs a qualitative approach, I will want to pursue qualitative approach. Just that it requires less of statistics, it requires less of so-called mathematical applications. Let us not imagine that qualitative research can be just so superficial and so fragile an approach. Okay, now I will try to present my screen once more. Just tell me whether you can see the my PPT. 1 minute. Okay, is my PPT visible? The first slide?
Yes, madam.
Okay, thank you so much. So, in case my voice breaks or something like that, just tell me, I will switch off my video. Okay. So, are these just a warming up session to the aspects of social research? Research, as we know, that it is just a contribution to knowledge. We try to understand, we try to explore certain aspects which are not known to us. And sources of knowledge can have other alternatives, as we are seeing on the screen. One is authority. Anybody who may be elder to us, anybody elder to us in power, in age, in authority, in hierarchy, can tell us that, okay, this is what happens, and we take it for granted. Something which is followed up in tradition over ages, from time, we accept it as knowledge base. Something which tells us that, okay, this is what, commonsensically should have happened or should happen. So that is the knowledge which our common sense tells us. There is, of course, the very, very powerful source of knowledge nowadays, the media, and beyond the print media, beyond the other forms of media with which we were so long very, very comfortable, now comes the social media, which has become very active, and again, which has thrown up a Pandora's box. It has opened up a Pandora's box of social research issues. So what media tells us is a source of knowledge, and of course, personal experience. Since I will be more or less relating to primary research, I mean, research which involves primary data. So personal experience or field level experience or fieldwork experience really is a source of knowledge to researchers. But why have I pointed out all these alternatives to social research? Just because sometimes when we are doing the so-called, I mean, the scientific research or scientific social research, um, when right at the end or right in the beginning, when we are identifying problems, pointing out the research questions or formulating the objectives, or at the very end trying to write our interpretations or major findings, we tend to mix up, we tend to mix up, what we know from authority, what we know from tradition, what we know from common sense, what we gather from media, and what we have experienced from our own personal and professional uh, stay on the earth. So when we will be doing that, when we will be accepting something which is outside our scope of research, that will not make the research so-called reliable and valid. Okay, so let us also remember that there are these sources of knowledge which are as important, but which we need to handle with care. In order to know the qualitative research designs or the qualitative way of doing research, we should also know the quantitative research. I'm sure all of you have just know it, and we have learned in our lessons that it is the most scientific form of research, where the logical positivism is followed as a philosophy, and the objects or the concepts are quantified, operationalized to the very basic, and relationship among the concepts is presented in the form of hypothesis, which primarily tries to figure out causal relationships and also contributes to future prediction. So these are the key words for quantitative research. And at the same time, the qualitative research helps us to seek answers, helps us to understand events, happenings, experiences, phenomena in particular contexts, in particular situations. Background is very important. Environment is important. The context is important. The research setting is important. It may be the home, it may be the room, it may be the group, it may be a community, it may be a country, it may be an organization, it may be the world as a whole. It may be in the forest, it may be in the classroom, it may be in the offices. So wherever our inquiry is located is important. And that should be taken into consideration. Of course, we try to reduce, and it will never, it is not actually, when you think of it, it does not match. Statistical techniques does not match. It is not needed. So why do we have to think about it actually? Okay, you don't have to always try to justify your research by using statistical techniques. So let us forget about it at the present moment. As best, we can use a little bit of a descriptive statistics if at all needed. So we should gear up our minds as qualitative researchers now for these 2 hours, that we will try to unearth, we should be trying to discover the layers of experiences, the different domains, the different strands of human thought, the different ways an event has happened or may have happened, which we otherwise would not have known. So it is a sort of, exploration. It is a sort of, getting to know to the very bottom of your heart, to understand what the person, the participant, as we say in research, that is called as a respondent in quantitative research, has undergone. And the participant may be again an individual, it may be a group, it may be an institution, it may be a country, it may be any unit. So once we are geared up to that, once we are motivated to go through that procedure, we can as well go to the next slide. So here there is a color code given, that since I know mostly we will be doing empirical research, what we have to gather is data, information, empirical evidence, which we will be gathering through our senses. Now, the activation of our senses, I mean, all our senses is so very important in qualitative research, much more, I would say, than quantitative research, because in quantitative research, we have a particular boundary within which we can act. But in qualitative research, we are not having that boundary. So it is the researcher becomes very important in terms of how to use his or her own senses. So the qualitative and the quantitative ways of collecting data will also be different. Now, qualitative research designs are many, actually. If you go through the dissertations available on the web, but the primary three types of qualitative research design are grounded theory, ethnography, phenomenology, and of course we can have case study. Again, that word case study is, again, it has a lot of implications. It has a lot of different ways of understanding. Case study may be a method, case study may be a design, case study guide may be a tool. So whatever it is, but case study also can be a research design, but I have not written it here. Of course, narrative research is also there. So there are different forms, but these are the primary classical forms of qualitative research design. And of course, quantitative research design, just to have another aspect of it, will be descriptive and experimental. Apart from that, there are other explanatory, diagnostic. We can have other quantitative research designs also, which is not in our purview now. Okay. Now, in terms of gathering data, we will be going on to the research designs in detail sometimes later on. But I was wanting to tell you about the projective techniques. Maybe the slides have just gone back and forth a little about the use of project, because why am I telling you this? I hope you are listening. That collecting data, that as we say, I mean, data again, looks very dry, sounds very dry in qualitative research. I would say understand experiences, feel the condition, understand the mindset. So in order to do that, always the mundane or the simplistic communication does not work. Because, say for example, we are trying to work with very vulnerable groups, like for example, in the aspect of disability, in the aspect of juvenile delinquents, in the aspect of children, or children who are abused, say for example, or in the prison setup, or with the third gender, or with very elderly people who refuse to cooperate, or with in a clinical setup where there are participants who are depressed or anxious or having certain tendencies which are harmful. So if you have these vulnerable set to work with, You need to innovate. You will need to adapt. You will need to think of other techniques of collecting what they have experienced into your journal or notebook or audio video tapes, whatever you will be allowed to carry. That ethical considerations also need to be very, very subtly, very, very sensitively maintained. That is, I hope that all of you will be knowing what ethical principles you have to follow while collecting data, more so in qualitative research. So these projective techniques are what they are, sometimes what is the meaning of project? A projector, there is something shown on the there is something on the screen which the projector magnifies, or projector helps to understand it better. It's sort of a facilitator. So similarly, these techniques enable the respondents or the participants to comfortably, spontaneously, meaningfully, harmlessly open up their experiences to the researcher. So this is the utility of projective techniques, and there are many actually, and I won't be able to go through each and every of it. Just a quick going through it. Say, for example, bringing an item. So it's like, we have props in dance sequences, just like that. You bring an item, you show it. It may be anything. I mean, of course, you have to do your homework. You just can't bring anything and everything. Maybe there is a pilot survey done, or pilot, no, not a survey actually, it's a pilot visit, or introductory visits, or rapport building visits done, and then you understand that certain objects interest the respondent, they interest the participant. So maybe, say for example, a transistor, maybe for an elderly person, a transistor, or a particular type of a toy to a child who is not talking, maybe, and then you have your ways of conversing. So that is one. Sometimes even elderly people are made to listen to older songs of the earlier times. So that is it. Guided fantasy, you make the imagination flow of the participant, but you don't let it go haywire. You guide the imagination. Say for example, you take back the youth to the first day in school or the first day in college. I mean, if the problem area is in the school or the problem area is in the college, that you have you want to explore. So first day in college, and then you guide what happened, which class will you go, who was your first friend. So it will be sort of a fantasizing, or it may be more of imagination put into it. What if you did not go, or what if you did into another college? What would have happened? So a comparative picture would come. Psycho drawing maybe is if you have experienced anxiety or pain, or abuse, or unwellness, or bitterness, then if you are asked to draw, then it gets distorted. If you are asked to draw something, then even that also gets distorted, the face, or the environment, the trees and all, it gets distorted. So it helps if you have a trained psychologist with you, then you can always use a facilitator, because qualitative research again needs team building for your interpretation. Courtroom drama, again, if it is, it has to take back you into some event, some action that have taken place, some interchange of words, some actions and reactions that have taken place. So you can react that. It is called a courtroom drama because many times courtroom dramas are enacted, reacted, so that the person, is asked that whether if you would have said the other thing, what would have happened. So, but sometimes even outside the court, even at homes or even in schools, this can be done once again. That setup can be done, and then the entire event can be enacted to see how the respondent or the participant reacts, and at which moment the participant lights up in mind. Role play, as we all know, there is a playing of a particular character, and then seeing how the person reacts by the researcher, or you may take also a trained facilitator. So I mean, I will just go through it. So bubble drawing, as we all know, you can draw two figures, and then you put a bubble on top of the heads and ask the person to fill it up. Then what are these two people saying? Say, for example, you get an idea that the person is not well in school. So the child, maybe a small child, and maybe an adult who represents the teacher. So you can have two bubbles on top of their heads and ask the child to write anything, or the youth to write anything. So the extent to which the participant writes negative words or negative phrases, or negative sentences, will make you aware about the degree to which the negativity has engulfed that person's mind. That is bubble drawing, personification, word association, mapping. So these are different ways of using techniques to make the person open up. Otherwise, sometimes, as I say, that you have to be very, very motivated to gather data, because you know why we always, qualitative research, whenever we say, people say that how do we analyze it, what tool do we use, and what techniques do we use for data analysis, what is the software that we use, that will fall into place. There are experts who know that, and those are using technology to our advantage. But before that, the actual collection of data, as we say in quantitative research, but in qualitative research, as we say, the understanding of the phenomena, the comprehension of the meaning of the event is very important. If you have that, either as an audio tape, or as a videotape, or as your journal, or in your diary, or in your narratives, anything, but you should have the rich information, then your 80% of your research is done. Rest, your coding and categorizing and whatever interpretation, analysis will fall into place. So that is why I am all the more importantly asking you to remember that there are lot of ways in order to collect information, understand the phenomena, the meaning of events, but you have to use these techniques. And the more, the number of techniques will help you to validate your research all the more, all the better. So these are just different ways of data analysis, as we were saying that there is a qualitative data analysis and a quantitative data analysis. So I will not go into it. This we all know. I think you will be having classes on that. More, in more details maybe. But one thing you can just see here, that in qualitative data analysis, we try to generate hypothesis. We try to, it's not that we have to put it in the form of a hypothesis. It may be in the form of certain themes that we write, that we gather from thematic analysis, and then just wait for those themes to be utilized in further research so as to put those into a theory. So in quantitative data analysis, what we try is we try to test the hypothesis and then use it in prediction. And in qualitative data analysis, we try to develop or generate hypotheses. Okay. So we I think 2 slides later that we'll be doing the qualitative approach to research and quantitative approach to research, which is very important again. The inductive and the deductive approaches, and sometimes before determining which design I will opt for, we go backwards. We take a problem, we see how we will analyze it, and then we go back to determining our design, and then we determine the approach, which is very wrong, which should not happen. And it will not give us that, that stimulation, that punch, that, okay, this is interesting. It should be just, just go normally. If you have an identified area of interest, you see what you want your research to do, what you want to understand or gather from your research, and see whether it fits into a qualitative approach to research or a quantitative approach to research, and then you decide on your designs. I guess these steps are already known to all of you, but these steps are very simple. It is very simplistically written, but each and every step, as I said, is important in its own location, in its own context. Okay. Now, primarily, in terms of understanding the approach, what we have to remember is that in qualitative research, what we are trying to do is we are trying to explore a particular issue at stake, or a particular problem area, or a particular area of interest. And the area or the identified interest is such that it is not possible to have a huge database. If that is possible, it is better you go in for quantitative research. Now, there the researcher has to be very, very matured in terms of approaching or designing a particular research. Areas which are not explored earlier further in depth, there are areas of exploration, participation, empowerment. Now, empowerment is another key word which has got huge amounts of quantitative research as well as qualitative research, and both done, in huge numbers. But whereas in empowerment and quantitative research, empowerment is, structured into, or, categorized into, different ways of understanding. In qualitative research, it is more of, the appropriate decision making, the power over one's mind, the choice of person and the choice of profession, the choice of everyday life, everyday decision making, mobility, independence, freedom. So, this is how you should understand that whether your area of interest requires a qualitative approach or requires a quantitative approach. So that is to be important. And primarily, in most qualitative researches, as they start, you do not have a huge base to fall upon. So you may have, handful of participants. You may have one community. You may have even one case. You may, want to get more cases, but then you can, of course, start with a case. And then you enhance your data. You make your data increase. You make your data flow out like a fountain. In the same way that you try to assume that the area of interest should be not only the participant but also the reality, the situation in which the participant resides. And that situation is changing. That is a dynamic reality. And though we may use numbers, though we may use, quantifications, but we cannot do without words. We cannot do without sentences. We cannot do without expressions. We cannot do without verses. We cannot do without drawings sometimes. And we have to train. We means the researchers have to train ourselves. And that training is silent, mind you. And that is why it is so difficult. That training is entirely with one's own self. If the researcher is, doing the research hands-on, that how do I see the world from the perspective of the participants? Is it that easy? It is not easy, but difficulty does not mean it is impossible. But I am a person. I have my beliefs. I have my rearing into a set of conditions. And I view the world with my own matured outlook. And I cannot deny that I am judgmental at times. But accepting all that, I train myself to gear my mind and my research acumen to see the world from the perspective of the participants. At least to record it, try to record it as close as possible. We do not want to predict. We do not want to summarize. We do not want to understand causal factors. We do not want to find out factors. We just want to understand. In understanding, if we can unearth certain factors, that may be contribution to the generation of hypothesis. But I have also to realize that I am being a human being, I am working with another human being. So subjectivity will definitely creep in the conversation, the rapport building, the interaction, the recording. In qualitative research, if we say that we are neutral, let us not accept it. Let us try to be as neutral as possible, but we cannot say that we will be able to be neutral. We have to be accepting for the fact that, yes, we are subjective. But let us be subjective. There is no problem in it. But we should also try to understand the subjective dimension of human experiences with whom I am wanting to involve in my research. Just as quantitative data is reductionist, summarizing, measures of mean, median, and mode, just one number, which will summarize, say, 10,000 information in a variable. So it's a huge condenser, huge data condenser. because the base is large. So quantitative approach and qualitative approach needs to be kept in mind right from the beginning of research. You cannot work backwards. That will not be interesting. That will not be that will not make you enjoy your research. These are quantitative data analyzing. This was just there in the slide, so it's all right. We'll just go past it. And just a color-coded differentiation of quantitative and qualitative research, where we know that the blue is for quantitative observations for quantitative research, and the red is observations for qualitative research. And as we all know, and by now you must be knowing the differences, but sometimes, you know what, keywords help, words help. Like if you are just asked to brainstorm on what do you mean by quantitative research, or brainstorm what do you mean by qualitative research, you can just say objectivity, more focus on variables, reliability, validity, neutrality, context free. One minute. Context free, many large base of many units, use of statistical and advanced statistical analysis, assuming that the researcher is detached from the research. That is, the researcher is absolutely neutral. And it can happen more, much more. I mean, I will, 1 minute. হ্যালো, হ্যাঁ রেখে দিয়ে চলে যাও। হ্যাঁ হ্যালো, রেখে দিয়ে যান। হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ, okay, sorry. As far as possible, the researcher has got more possibility of being neutral rather than in qualitative research. The keywords in qualitative research are: you construct social reality, you build it block by block. You should know, whether you have reached the starting point. You should have an idea whether you've reached the end. So, and that is difficult. I mean, where to stop in the life experiences of the participant, it is difficult. But as far as it satisfies your focus, your research questions, you have to continue your probing. The cultural meaning, the context is important. The values are important. The life is important. The values of life are important. The way of living is important. The habits are important. All these mean your culture. Focus on interactive processes. There should be continuous flow of interaction. Otherwise, the rapport is cut off. Otherwise, the communication is stalled. And once it ends, communication ends, information stops coming. And you're exploring the entire meaning of the context gets a backseat. The rigor of research, because you cannot have nothing in qualitative research and say, okay, whatever I do. There are ways. There are ways. I mean, the ways may seem very simple, but the ways should be followed. We will see. Of course, we accept values are present, and we accept and we find out the values. Here the values means the values that are, for both the respondent, the participant and the researcher. Importance of context, few cases, subjects, because the research area is such. If you can find a whole lot of cases, then you as well do the quantitative research, as I said. Apart from thematic analysis, there are other forms of analysis which you will be studying into your uh, uh, data analysis of qualitative research, but thematic analysis is the most common. And of course, involvement of researcher needs to be accepted. It's not that the researcher should be trying to influence the research. No, researcher is involved does not mean that the researcher will try to intervene and influence the process. It will all mean that the researcher must be sometimes the researcher has to take a more proactive role, because you do not have a structured questionnaire in your hand. You may not have a structured interview schedule. You may not have a structured checklist, which are the tools of quantitative research. You may just have an interview guide. You may not have that. You may just go with a blank mind, because you do not know what you will explore. You may just have certain clues that, okay, I'll start with the childhood. Okay, I'll start with the profession. Okay, I'll start with the event that happened at the end. And let me see how it turns out. And that's why you need more than one sitting and a lot of sittings. So the researcher has to be involved. But that does not mean the researcher will not forget that, okay, I also have my own judgments and I should not project it. I should not, I should not lead the discussion. I should not make the participant, the respondent, take any clue from my saying. I may as well just paraphrase. I may as well just summarize what the person is saying or what the group is saying, just to make sure that I have taken it correctly. But it's not that I will want to influence it. So just be very careful that how far, because it's difficult, as I say time and again, it's difficult to understand where do I stop. How do I react? How do I stop showing my emotions to this extent? And unless and until you can do that, you train your mind, you train your facial expressions, you train your language, you train your voice, you train your body language to show that you just want to know the meaning of that particular person's life and the happenings that happened, the person or the group or the community or the institution, whatever. Other than that, there is no clue that the participant may take from me. Only the small bits of yeses and nos and ways to make the information flow. So that is it. So now building theories, as we do in qualitative research, we try to first get the blocks, the building blocks. It does not happen in one research. Maybe we manufacture one block in one research, another block in another research, and then a third researcher utilizes these two blocks and builds a theory or builds a theoretical framework. And this is what inductive reasoning is. You start with your observations, you start with your flexible understanding, and you go on to bring out the key issues and bring out the different strands of understandings from it. It may be themes, it may be words, it may be components, it may be domains, and then slowly build up the theory. Whereas in the deductive logic, what we do is we start from the concepts which are there, established concepts, operationalize it, assume a relationship, again based on maybe existing theories or new theories or older theories, and then get the field reality to predict it or confirm it or disown it. Deductive logic. So this is it. Why I'm very biased towards using words in my PPTs is that it really makes you think that if you have to talk about deduction to somebody very junior, say for example a class 11 and 12, they also are having research nowadays, even in graduation. You should know exactly which words you should be uttering before them. So from abstraction, from concepts, from theories, you go forward to empiricism, to evidence-based testing, hypothesis testing, and prediction. This is how it works. And for induction, which is the approach, which is the logic for qualitative research, we start with observations, we start with empiricism, and we move on to generation of concepts, generation of themes, generation of blocks, generation of hypotheses. This is how it works. Okay, I can just go through. So, okay, this is again one important aspect of understanding. How do I handle my literature review in qualitative research? I mean, how do I handle in the sense, of course, you have to read. But when do I do it, and how do I know that I have done, I've started the literature review at the right point of time? There are the very classical ways of understanding qualitative research is that you do not do any literature review. Avoid, because it may, however little, it may bring in the judgment inside us as to how to deal with the problem. But again, for new researchers or not very matured researchers, a first-hand experience may have a sort of a cursory glance or just a bird's eye view of what happens in this domain of exploration. What are the studies? Some very basic studies. Good if it is guided study, and then you have certain basic understanding and then continue your research once the data collection starts, because it is a concurrent process. This literature review will help you at the end of your or nearing the end of your work to relate and to generate concepts, theories, themes. So this is again a very dicey. 1 minute. Hello? Yes. Sorry, I'm in a lecture session now. Okay. So this is a very, very, conflicting area of research. But what I would advise is that if you are confident of your area of interest, you may as well do again the parallel of pilot study in quantitative research, just to get an idea about the field, just to get an idea about your community, just to get an idea about the various aspects that may come up in the proper data collection. And then you can fall back on literature, but train yourself not to use whatever is there in the existing literature, because you may have certain projective techniques lying ahead, lying dormant. which you may be using for your own research, which nobody else have used before. So it's not that literature review should be your master. You should be the master of literature review. You should use literature review to your own purpose, not follow literature review, in toto. So that is how I see it. Okay. Okay. Again, the field, a very important aspect of data collection in qualitative research. Which field do I take, and who should be my participants? This again requires back and forth, going back and forth to different fields. And finally, understanding which participants you will start your rapport building with, who will be able to share their thoughts and feelings about the phenomena. Or sometimes you may feel that, okay, this participant is very appropriate, but there is a problem in its communication, his or her communication. But will you stop going to that, taking that participant? No, you should try. You have techniques in your hand. You have various data collection tools in your hand. So appropriateness comes first, and then convenience. Selection of participants. Okay. I'm just rushing through this. Purposive sampling, yes. It should, I mean, of course, the sample size, there's no parallel concept of, sample size in qualitative data. And again, where do we end, and the sample that should be, that is to be taken, is again a very dicey area of work in qualitative research, because again, judgments can come forward there, convenience can come forward there, and sometimes even there is researcher burnout also. Okay, enough is enough now, and how far can you go on exploring? What I would advise is keep a lot of time for data collection. Because as I said, once you have that enriched data, your analysis will fall very fast in place, very fast. And now since you have the software, it will fall very fast in place. Even if you're not using the software, if you have a small sample with huge data generated out of it, you may as well go in for mechanical or manual data analysis and do it within very fast, very short period of time. But keep a lot of time for your data collection, unless and until you have that gut feeling, that researcher's freedom, that researcher's lens, that now I am not getting anything new from my data which would suffice my research questions. So I have done what I have done. Maybe I will go for one or two respondents or participants more if the same thing comes. And what happens if you're not getting that gut feeling? What will happen? If you're not getting that gut feeling, do you abandon your research? Or you just say, no, let me stop there and then? No, but then you are not following the steps. If you are not getting the gut feeling, then perhaps what I may say is that you may not have formed your research questions appropriately. You may need to, sharpen. You may need to, narrow down, or you may need to maybe remove, or whatever. I mean, you may need to do something about your research questions, or you may need to divide your respondents into groups or something like that, which will help you get that feeling. Okay, you may need to reduce your sample, maybe to the age or the setting or the gender, something you have to do, which, I mean, this iterative thing will come into action at that time. That iterative characteristic of qualitative research will come in force, and you may need then to validate it with some experts at that time. of course, your supervisor, that what do I do at that point of time? Instead of just abandoning or, just taking the judgment that well and good, I will not, whatever I will be, sort of dishonest in my work. So you need to maybe, reframe your objectives, reframe your description of your sample, and then refine it, and then come back and do the finish your data collection. Okay. Data analysis, you have to, again, that iterative thing should be there. If you're doing it mechanically, it will come, it will come like that. Because, once you, first of all, you are listening to it, or you are looking at it. If you're observing, you are looking at it, you are feeling it, you are hearing it, and then you are, re-listening it to your audio tapes maybe again, and then maybe you're transcribing it. So that's a third time you are going through it, and then you are going through it for patterns and differences and codes and whatever. So that that rereading, reading and analyzing, synthesizing and categorizing will continue unless and until you come out with concrete results. Okay. When should we say that a qualitative research is of a standard research? When perhaps we would be able to link our observations or our generation of concepts and themes into a theoretical framework, or into link it at least, or possibly suggest some theoretical linking. When we use methods which are innovative, methods which are simple yet novel, ideas are novel, and you write, your good writing in the sense means your data, your narration is rich. And the quality is a word which Pratt had used in 2008. That the qualitative research should also be quality-wise enriching. That feeling should be there, that this is enough. I have written enough for that purpose of that research question. Okay. I will just rush through this. I will not go through this. Again, these are very important. But I don't think I have the time, so I will just go through it. Some of the best practices that you can have in qualitative, this is a checklist which all of us have to follow. All of us here in this audience, we have to follow if we are pursuing qualitative research. We have to be doing accuracy checks at all levels. We have to give voice to the participants. No dominating of the participants' voices. We have to have different levels of analysis. Different levels of analysis in the sense, different categories of analysis. Like if you are exploring caregiving, say for example, caregiving of say HIV/AIDS patients. If you are doing the caregiving, the research on caregiving of HIV/AIDS patients, you may have, you need to work on with, of course, the direct caregiver. You may need also to interact with the doctors, the nurses, the community people, the peer groups, the relatives, the neighbors, the person himself or herself, anybody. Multiple methods. You have to use multiple methods, because since here we are not able to take a standard science of statistics into our confidence, we have to have different methods as our facilitator to validate our research. Novel or less common methods. If you are not using less common methods, you may as well as do a small survey from your qualitative research. That will become quantitative research. Strong theoretical foundation or framework or perspective, that is always there. Otherwise, you know what? A research project is diluted with just a project proposal or just a investigative journalism or something like that. Unless and until you can link it with a theoretical perspective or even remotely to a theoretical framework or suggest some model, something like that. And use more than one methods of data collection, analysis, triangulation. This is all about scientific adequacy, that is called the rigor. And I have time and again emphasized on researchers' responsibility, and I hope as researchers we would be able to consciously exercise, consciously remember to follow out ethics, rapport, interactive communication, innovative methods, patience, etc., while doing our qualitative research. In quantitative research, we have reliability and validity checks. I'm not going through it. And in qualitative research, we have credibility, transferability, dependability, and confirmability. These are big words. But what is internal validity in quantitative approach? That is, the entire design is appropriate. That right from the topic to the objectives, to the methodology, to the design, to the data analysis, to the conclusions or findings should be in one linked to you should be able to make a garland out of that. It should be intrinsically solid. And same with credibility. Transferability is what is external validity, like how was the focus of attention or the research area of interest and the research that is being done smoothly is located into the natural environment. Was it a smooth transfer that the researcher was able to reach out to that particular context? Was the context appropriate to the research? So this is transferability. Dependability is, of course, reliability. And conformability means at the end, whether we can be able to build certain blocks in the theory, that is conformability. Now, there are certain ways which are very mundane, as I say, very simplistic in terms of bringing out the credibility or bringing out the truth of the finding, that whatever I'm finding is credible in the sense that my research is bound into a holistic pattern or in a concrete understanding, the internal solidity of the research. How can you do it? These are, of course, back and forth, it will go. But the most important is you have to spend time in the field. You have to be persistent. You have to be repeated. You have to use more than one method. So these are all the ways which you have to have a checklist. You have to, push yourself every time. That is my fieldwork appropriate? Peer debriefing. You choose appropriate peer group. Interact. Share your thoughts. Report certain failures. Where did I go wrong that I had to abandon this particular case? What will I do to make this participant open up? Referential adequacy is something I have not used in my research. It is maybe it shows that Sometimes you may to refer back and forth in your own research. That is, sometimes you may, keep certain things aside and focus on certain other things in your research, and then go back to the maybe the first objective. You start with the first objective, and you may not be, having that feeling, okay, I've reached the saturation level. Then you may leave that into the archive of your research, and then go back to the second and third, and then again refer back to it. So you may need to have your flexibility at your peak. Member checks. This is one aspect which we mostly either we do not have the scope of exercising, or we do not consciously do it, like member checks or informant feedback. The participants who work with us in our research, each and every time, each and every session needs a paraphrasing, needs a summarizing, that, okay, this is what you're wanting me to understand. Is this what had happened? Did I understand you correctly? I hope I have understood you correctly. And then, just you have to have that flexibility, that you listen, you make up the points in your mind, and then you say it there. And of course, you are recording, but then you may not have that particular moment coming again. Informant feedback. So that is, again, we just give a thank you in the acknowledgement. That is not worthwhile. You may need to go back and take a feedback from the informant, and that may as well give you a scope for further research. Reliability as well, is the mirror image of dependability. That is how far you can involve, or you can track the changing contexts. Like, in a person's life, there have been changes. Have you been able to take it into your work? The evolution of an organization, the changing political and social scenario, has it been taken into consideration in your research? And that means you have to have that hold, that matured knowledge base, in order to understand what could be the different context where this person or this institution has been traversing through time, or could traverse in the future. So dependability is how that this is. You should have your checks and balances into your way of questioning, your way of formulating the points in your interview guide. Of course, through an audit trail, as we say, this is how. Okay, I will show you an audit trail. It is very simple. Transferability, again, in other contexts. So that also needs to be there. I mean, you are talking about a family, coping, say, for example, for, COVID-19. So would this apply to a family of migrants? Would this apply to a family where there are women-headed households? So maybe you will have to, refocus or refine your approach in order to have because this question may come up when you will be defending your research. You may need to answer or defend such questions. Neutrality, of course. Again, for neutrality, you can use an audit trail. And sometimes, it is nice to open up on the part of the researcher also, that, you may introduce yourself, just to make a good rapport building, and then also, say certain things which will show your personal biases to a certain extent, but you may consider alternative explanations also. Say, I would have done this, then how you would have reacted to it, or how did you do this so you may use your subjectivity to your advantage. Okay, so that is one way. And the other way is to do the peer debriefing, that, whether the way you are going about approaching a particular research area of interest would have been done by another researcher interested in the same area. So you may have different ways of confirming the neutrality. This is an audit trail. So this is the entire step-by-step thing. So this you can just go through in your free time. If you have any problem, you can always fall back and contact me. Limitations of qualitative research. Of course, as I said, a human being working with another human being. So there will be limitations, there will be conflicts, there will be judgments, and that needs to be worked with. But the strength is that underlying the meaning, underlying the experiences may give us the scope of possible interventions, may give us the scope of helping out that particular group or that particular individual into rehabilitation, into recovery. So that is the reality. That is the strength. Okay, so coming back to the qualitative research designs, any questions so far? I'm just having to rush through. Do you have any questions, audience? Or do I continue? Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. You can continue, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I hope I am clear about what was told for the last, say, around 1 hour, 1 or 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Are you getting the hang of qualitative research?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay. So these are the 3 qualitative research designs that I have had, put on this particular slide. So as we all know that phenomenology means that you should try to unearth or describe the lived experiences of the participant. You live with the participant. You construct the experience of the participant. You seek to achieve a deep understanding of what the participant went through a very rigorous, systematic, point-to-point exploration. That is phenomenology, and you have to have a rich narration. I have certain researches which have used phenomenology as an approach. If you want, I can give the files to you. You can go through the dissertations and see how phenomenology has been used as a qualitative research design. What are the basic philosophical tenets is that we live in our consciousness, and our consciousness records all our experiences, and there are different ways of us interpreting it, and that may lead us to happiness, that may lead us to strategies, that may lead us to sadness. But the researchers should be able to access that consciousness and build the multiple realities that the participant has undergone in any particular situation. That may be a lifetime experience, that may be experience of a single event, that may be a particular dimension, like a professional dimension or a personal, whatever. That may be a particular relationship. And it focuses the meaning of lived experiences. And the role of the researcher is, of course, the researcher becomes the instrument for data collection. Like the quantitative research, the tools of data collection is more important. Here, the researcher himself or herself is very, very important in terms of data collection, in terms of rapport building, in terms of, bracketing beliefs. What do you mean by bracketing beliefs? that you will be listening to a lot of things. You will be understanding lot of things, but you should put your brackets. You should, make certain groups and either remove it or you should explore it further. So you should be able to do some, continuous concurrent analysis of what should be your next step. So that is the role of the researcher. Small sample, purposive sample. Again, as I say, if you can get a large sample, then you as well do a quantitative research. The participants should be able and willing to talk. And of course, in-depth interviews, observations, written descriptions, diaries, journals, photographs, pictures, anything which is handy. And of course, as I said, data analysis will be going back and forth in the data collected, understand the categories, the themes, and then put them into groups and get the patterns and differences and put them into final blocks. Conducted after data analysis, data collection analysis. So you can say that it is completed. You can conduct it during data collection also. It is not entirely would be correct to say that you do it after data collection, but you can complete it only after your final analysis is complete. Now, what should be there in your findings? So this is a checklist for all of us who will be pursuing phenomenological research. The findings should be that it should, number one, report the essence of the experience. That what was the experience like? What was the lived experience like? That should be reported. And the reader should also understand what was felt during such an experience. That also is important, because if you have to go into rehabilitation, if you have to go into aspects of counseling, if you have to go into aspects of coping, if you have to go into aspects of bringing the person into mainstream, then you have to know what it felt like, what it was like to experience that phenomenon, or what the participant is of the idea. Say, for example, you ask the prisoner, you ask the under trial, what is it like to be rehabilitated to you? What do you actually want in rehabilitation? The prisoner's perspective. That should be understood. That was, of course, I just rushed through. Again, the second is the grounded theory. As I said, I also have researches which I have downloaded certain researches which have grounded theory as its basic approach to research. And it is, of course, an approach in qualitative research, a design where you try to, of course, understand a particular event in society, a particular phenomena, experiences, the patterns, interactions, communications, and try to find out the the code, the categories in it, which ultimately can be substantiated into a theory. So you have the ultimate aim of contributing to a theoretical framework or a theory, and you approach your research interest, or you approach your research context, the participant in the context, in that way, in that manner. It is useful when you need to get an evidence of an old theory, for an older theory, or that you adapt an older theory, an older perspective that is already established in a newer say, for example, under the newer perspective of pandemic, you have the strengths-based perspective in the focus of the pandemic. It is primarily to develop a theory and to understand what are the core processes, what are the components, what are the linkages that can be put into a framework with a motive to contribute or to substantiate into or collate it into a theory. Here, language becomes very important. Here, concepts become very important. How you understand concepts become very important. How you relate concepts become very important, because of course you have the idea of trying to contribute to a theory, and theories are relationships with concepts. It is that. It is how to put social happenings into a framework. You may take an established framework and adapt it to your context, or you may just map your social understanding of the social situation into an established framework. So primarily, grounded theory believes in the processes that needs to be studied, believes in the relationships, the dynamics, the ongoing events that may be studied and that may be related to a framework, a flowchart, which will be contributing to a theory. Here, of course, the researcher needs a very matured handling of the situation. Of course, becomes an observer and a participant, and does not make any effort to put aside assumptions, because the assumptions will be ones which will be building the boundary of the theory. A theory is bounded by assumptions, isn't it? So you should have the assumptions. You should not be able to see, just deny or neglect the assumptions of that particular theory where you are wanting to contribute. On the other hand, you have to put the theoretical assumptions and see how it fits into your social setting, social processes. Of course, here also you should have the sample where the particular social process will be under study, and the saturation reasoning also is there. Data collection is concurrent, audio taped. Observation becomes very important here. Field notes becomes very important, because since you are having observation as a tools and technique, you should have field notes, and participant observation can also be there, unless and until the researcher becomes very judgmental. The data collection should be a combination of various methods and also literature. Here in the grounded theory design, the review of literature takes a very important position, because you have to be theoretically strong, theoretically sound in terms of the particular theories or theory which you are trying to link your work to. And so reading the literature would be concurrent with your research. The third is, of course, ethnography, which is a borrowed research design from anthropology. Here, the context is very important. Context becomes very important, and the researcher tries to understand the insider's perspective, because the culture and the context will have some players, will have some stakeholders, the community, and the researcher as the outsider should be be able to locate and position himself inside the community, so inside the context, so as to understand the different ways, the different nuances, the different subtleties of that particular community or the particular culture, that particular group, that particular way of living, as is reflected in different ways of our life. This also has an iteration is a common pattern in most social researches, be it qualitative and quantitative, and more so in qualitative. And we can have different, of course, here it is mentioned, the four domains, the four levels of analysis, whether you use different domains and then you try to link it to the larger domain, different categories, link it to the domains, or you have different categories at the different levels, as in taxonomic analysis, you have different words or phrases as in componential analysis, and of course the thematic analysis. But whatsoever, the analysis will again fall in place, but the goal is to discover the patterns in that particular culture, and that is not easy as an outsider. The ethnographic findings should have two things: the cultural inventory that needs to be developed because of the hard work that is put by the researcher to be embedded in that particular cultural context, needs a detailed write-up on the particular cultural phenomenon. It may be momentary, it may be over a few months, it may be over a few days that the particular happening is done. A particular cultural custom or a particular event, particular festival, particular phenomenon, and of course a final report that will be the book or the article and the monograph. But the cultural inventory is something which we often forget, and that needs to be done so as to build the archive of culture to ethnographic findings. We also have case study research, which is actually, I have not put it in the three major types of research design, because case study can be used in phenomenological research. It can also be an ethnographic research, and of course in grounded theory. So it is not a purely distinctive pattern of research, but it is good that we know that case study can be an important instrument, can be an important design tool, can be an important tool also of social research. Okay, so I will just, because case study research is more or less known to all of us. If you have any doubts, then we can discuss it after class. Another is narrative research. Again, as I would say, narrative research, since it is here, I'm just talking about it. Narrative research can be linked to phenomenological research. Narrative research can be linked to ethnographic research. So, it all depends on how well you are a master of different techniques, different ways of, gathering information. Our narratives can, of course, be a specialization in terms of research design when you are doing, autoethnography or biography, life history or oral history, so that you have, you cannot use much of other techniques of data collection. You have to have the rich narrative analysis. So if you have that particular type of research for a more into historical researches, you may use narrative research design as a specific particular type of a research design. So you may have to re-story the process of gathering stories. So you may have to, make them rewrite, make them, relive their life. So that is important in a narrative research. And it is not easy because, the participant may need to recollect from memory, and sometimes it may go haywire, sometimes it may be needing a good guidance from the researcher. Now we can compare the five, of course, I've used the five types of research designs as part of focus of approach, unit of analysis, just a small analysis that I did, which you can just go through. Research problems suited for, forms of data collection, data analysis strategy, and research outcomes. So, focus of research, like N means the narratives, phenomenology, grounded theory, ethnography, and the case study. So, in the narrative research, we explore the life of an individual. In phenomenology, we understand the essence of the experiences. These are again this is the keyword or the brainstorming sort of a thing. In grounded theory, we develop a theory grounded in data. In ethnography, we describe and interpret a culture which is shared among a group. And in case study, we develop an in-depth description of an analysis of a case. So primarily, these are the differences, or even you can say comparisons, in terms of focus of approach. In terms of unit of analysis, in the narrative research, it is one or more individuals. In phenomenological research, there are several individuals who have the same shared experience. In grounded theory, it is actually a process, an action, or an interaction involving many individuals. In ethnography, it is a group that shares the same culture. And in the case study, it can be an event, which can be a case, in a program, an activity, or an individual, of course, which can be a case. As per the research problem suited for, where do you use narrative research? To tell stories of experiences, phenomenology to tell the essence of a lived phenomena, so that you may have suggestions for intervention, grounding theory in a field reality, so you try to link theory based on data. Ethnography, describe and interpret shared patterns of culture of a group, different similarities of patterns and different similarities of lifestyles, habits. And case study, in-depth understanding of a case, if you want. The research problem is suited for that. Forms of data collection, for these are not watertight compartments. You may have, back and forth, borrowing here and there. Narratives, we have documents and interviews as forms of data collection. Phenomenology, we have observations, interviews, documents. Grounded theories, we have interviews. We can also have documents. Ethnography, we have observation, more importantly, and interviews, and of course others. In case studies, we have interviews, documents, and observations. In terms of data analysis strategy, in narrative research, we have restoring the stories. We build the stories, rebuild the stories, develop themes, and use chronology, which is important and helpful, going over time, progressing over time. We have phenomenology, analyzing meaningful statements, describing the essence, the intrinsic experience. Grounded theory, we have, of course, coding, categorizing, linking, flowcharting, frameworking. In ethnography, we have description and thematic analysis, and in case studies, we have intra-case, inter-case, thematic analysis. Of course, these are very basics. In terms of research outcomes, we have in narratives, we have telling stories. That is the research outcome. So we will have the narrations. We will have experiencing of the phenomena and meaning of the themes as a phenomenological research outcome. Developing a theory would be the grounded theory research outcome. Describing a culture and analyzing patterns of themes as an ethnographic research outcome. And description and developing of themes as a research outcome of a case study. So this is the last slide for me, and let us just go through the summary, because we will have to know that what are we armed with at the end of the class. I hope all of you have been listening, but if we are listening, then what do we have in our hands? What is the take home from this class? We have a take home that we have 5 types of research studies, research designs that we have studied. And in the narrative research design, we will focus on individuals primarily and try to gather their experiences through observations and conversations and just write the stories of their experiences and lives. In phenomenological research designs, we go more in depth in terms of understanding the meaning of their lives, their pains, their anxiety, their happiness, their experiences, their coping, their survival, their conflicts. Grounded theory involves the creation of a theory through data collection, through empiricism, and organize them into or substantiate them into probably a theory, existing theory or new theory. Ethnographic studies focus on culture sharing, building an inventory of cultures, understand different cultures, understand what are the opportunities and challenges of the people in that culture. And of course, the case study is missing here. From the case study, we understand the in-depth nuances of a particular case and similar cases and try to understand the patterns of similarities and dissimilarities. So these are the different ways in which you can design your qualitative research. Only if you are motivated enough, you are trained enough, you are confident enough, you have that felt need enough to know that what your research interest is demands a qualitative approach to research. Other than that, a qualitative research should never be misused, misutilized, mishandled, and used inappropriately. So that is what I end with. So these are some of the books which you can go through, some of the journals. And the best to know about qualitative research is to go through the journals. What are the latest journal articles that the qualitative researchers are working on? What are the latest research interests that the qualitative research team, the researchers community are working on? That is important. And what is the methodology that they're using? So you should go through these journals, audience, and see where you stand, where your research interest coincides. Only then you will be able to, unless and until you do your homework, you will never be able to decide correctly whether to use qualitative or quantitative. What do you do? If you have finished your doctorate, then you have to do your projects. If you are doing your doctorate, then you have to, maybe if you are into that, okay. If you are planning, then you may need to know the quantitative and the qualitative and the mixed well, good enough to choose a purely qualitative research. So with that, I will end. And I don't know, I just went on talking because I enjoy talking about qualitative research. And now I will ask you to tell me what you would like to know from me, if you want to know anything at all.